Have you ever dressed your best, hoping to belong, only to be made to feel invisible? I know that feeling because I lived it. My name is Dorothy, I'm 72 years old, and the night I'm about to tell you about was supposed to be one of joy. Instead, it nearly broke me. But it also became the night I found my voice again. When my husband passed away, the house became too quiet, the kind of quiet that hurts. Every corner carried his memory, and every evening felt endless. My son Michael was all I had left, and I clung to the hope that his wife Lauren would see me as family too. I didn't need grand gestures. I just wanted a place at the table, a smile that said I mattered. So when Lauren's 40th birthday came around, I told myself this was my chance. I saved for months to buy a navy blue chiffon dress. It wasn't extravagant, but for me it was everything. The buttons were small pearls, hard for my stiff fingers to close, yet I wore them with determination. I wanted to walk into that party looking like a woman who still belonged, not just a widow living in yesterday. But instead of kindness, I was met with something else entirely. Lauren's embrace was cold, her words sharper than she knew. And later, before a room full of people, she looked me in the eye and told me not to speak. Not even a word. Do you know what that feels like? To have your very voice stripped from you in front of strangers and friends alike? I could have stayed silent that night. I could have shrunk into my chair and let shame finish what loneliness had already started. But the truth is, life has a way of cornering you until you realize silence is no longer an option. That was me, an old woman with tired bones but a fire in her chest, ready to burn through years of being overlooked. And so, the night that began with humiliation ended with something none of them expected. I took the very microphone that I was forbidden to touch, and with trembling hands I spoke. What I revealed that night changed everything. It exposed betrayal, uncovered secrets, and turned humiliation into victory. Before I go any further, let me pause here. To every grandmother, every mother, every woman watching this right now, I pray over your life. May your health be steady, your steps strong, and your heart comforted even in lonely days. May you be surrounded by children and grandchildren who respect and love you, and if you are going through pain, I pray you find peace and healing. You are not forgotten. Amen. And as I share my story, I want you to join me in this moment. Subscribe to this channel, share this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. That way, I can lift your name in prayer and stand with you in spirit. Because sometimes, knowing that someone cares is the greatest gift of all. So stay with me as I take you back to that night, the night I was told to stay silent at my daughter-in-law's birthday party, but instead found the courage to speak. I still remember standing in front of my mirror that evening, staring at a reflection that almost felt like a stranger. The navy blue chiffon dress hung softly on my shoulders, its little pearl buttons glistening under the weak light of my bedroom lamp. It wasn't just fabric to me, it was a statement. A promise to myself that even at 72, I could still walk into a room with dignity. But the truth is, that dress cost more than I should have spent. My pension only stretches so far, and groceries, medicines, and heating bills always come first. Still, I told myself, Dorothy, if you don't do this, you'll regret it. I wanted to show my son and his wife that I wasn't just the old woman left behind in a quiet house. I wanted to show them I still had a place in their world. My hands shook as I worked the buttons, not from nerves but from arthritis. These hands once cooked full meals for my family, scrubbed floors, stitched clothes, and carried my baby boy. Now they ache every morning. Something as simple as fastening tiny buttons turns into a test of patience. But that night, I finished the task with a quiet determination. The invitation hadn't even come by mail. No card to tuck into a drawer as a keepsake. Instead, a message had flashed on my phone, a digital card filled with colors and sparkles that I barely understood. My neighbor had to help me click the right box to respond. When I asked her why invitations weren't printed anymore, she laughed lightly and said, "That's old-fashioned, Mrs. Gable." Old-fashioned. That word cut me more deeply than she knew. When Michael arrived to pick me up, I held my breath the moment I saw him. He looked so much like his father, tall and strong in his gray suit, his tie neat and crisp. My boy, now a man with a family of his own. He smiled at me, gave my hand a gentle squeeze, and for a moment, The ache of loneliness softened. I thought, maybe tonight will be different. Maybe I'll finally feel included. The drive downtown felt both long and short at the same time. My neighborhood, quiet and lined with small houses, gave way to bright lights and tall buildings. By the time we pulled up to the restaurant, the Gilded Lily, my heart was thudding. The glass walls shimmered with golden light, and through them I could see well-dressed guests holding champagne flutes. I clutched my handbag tightly, praying I wouldn't feel out of place. The moment I stepped inside, the scent of perfume and the sound of laughter surrounded me. Everywhere I looked, women sparkled in sequins, and men stood proud in tailored suits. I tried to keep my shoulders straight, but deep inside I felt like a shadow drifting into a world too grand for me. I thought of my dress again, reminding myself why I'd bought it, to prove I still belonged. I spotted Lauren before she spotted me. She was at the center of it all, surrounded by friends who laughed at every word that left her lips. Her gown shimmered silver under the lights, and she carried herself as though she owned not only the room but the city itself. My son stood proudly at her side, a smile stretched across his face. I could tell he was proud of her, and in that moment, I wanted to be proud too. I wanted to feel part of it. When her eyes finally landed on me, her smile faltered, just for a breath, before returning in a polite but strained way. She made her way over, her perfume arriving before she did. She leaned in, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and whispered words that stung more than she realized. "You made it, Dorothy. I wasn't sure you'd find your way here." Her voice wasn't cruel, it was casual, as if she were making conversation. But to me, every syllable carried weight. I forced a smile, ignoring the knot in my chest. I told myself to be the bigger person, to let it pass. Still, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe she had hoped I wouldn't come at all. I found a small table near the corner of the room, tucked away from the chatter. From there, I watched the party unfold. The clinking of glasses, the bursts of laughter, the sound of music, it all washed over me. I wanted to join in, but something inside told me I didn't belong. I sat quietly, folding my hands in my lap, trying to keep my back straight, as though good posture might make me invisible to judgment. Michael moved easily through the room, shaking hands, sharing smiles. I saw the joy in him, the comfort he felt with his wife's friends. I couldn't blame him for it. He had built a life here, and I wanted nothing more than to see him happy. But part of me ached. Part of me wished he would glance back at me more often, that he would remember I was there too. From where I sat, I noticed Lauren's friend, a woman named Vanessa. She had been around before, at family dinners and gatherings. There was something watchful about her, the way her eyes scanned the room, the way she seemed to study people. I caught her looking at me once, her gaze steady, almost too steady, before she turned away. It sent a shiver through me, though I didn't understand why at the time. As I sat there, the hum of the party continued without me. I tried to focus on the decorations, the flowers arranged so perfectly, the lights glittering against the glass walls. Yet no matter how I tried to distract myself, I couldn't escape the feeling of being set apart, as though I was merely a guest in a life that used to be mine. And that's when a question began to form in my heart, a question that I want to ask you now. Have you ever been treated like an outsider in your own family? Have you ever sat at the edge of a celebration, watching the people you love most, and felt as though you were nothing more than an afterthought? If you have, then you know exactly how I felt that night. The evening carried on, laughter and chatter filling every corner of the room. I sat quietly, taking small sips of water, trying to look content even though my heart felt heavy. I reminded myself that this was Lauren's night, and I didn't want to cause trouble. Then Michael tapped a spoon against his glass. The sound rang clear, pulling everyone's attention. He stood tall in his gray suit, his face glowing with pride. My heart swelled as I watched him. My son, my boy who once clung to my skirt when he was afraid, now commanding a room full of people. He began his toast. His voice was steady, filled with warmth. He spoke of Lauren's beauty, her strength, her success as a businesswoman, and her role as a mother. Each word carried admiration, and though some of it was hard for me to hear, because I sometimes struggled to see that side of her, I still felt pride in him. My son loved his wife deeply, and he expressed it beautifully. As his words drew to a close, tears stung my eyes. I pressed a napkin against my face, hiding the trembling that had started in my hands. He raised his glass, and the room followed, cheering and clapping. For a moment, I thought perhaps the night would pass peacefully. Michael handed the microphone to Lauren. She looked radiant, smiling as the spotlight shifted to her. She thanked her friends for coming, cracked a few jokes about her younger days, and drew laughter with ease. She knew how to hold a room. I'll give her that. I clapped along, smiling faintly, hoping she wouldn't notice how small I felt in that vast sea of faces. But then her tone shifted. Her smile didn't fade, but her eyes sharpened, locking on me with a coldness I felt in my bones. She leaned slightly closer to the microphone, her voice cutting through the laughter that had barely died down. "There's one last thing I want to say tonight," she began, pausing long enough for the room to hush again. "I know some people might expect a big speech from my husband's mother. But let me be perfectly clear." I froze. My chest tightened. I knew those words weren't leading to kindness. She straightened her shoulders, her voice firm. "Don't you ever speak at my birthday party, Dorothy." The room fell still. I heard the clink of a fork being set down, the shuffle of shoes, and then nothing. Only silence so heavy it pressed on my chest. My cheeks burned hot. I felt every eye turned toward me, some filled with pity, others darting away, too uncomfortable to linger. Michael looked at the floor, his face flushed red. Not a word left his lips. My son, my only son, stood in silence. I wanted to disappear. My hands shook so badly I had to press them into my lap, hoping no one would notice. My throat ached as though words were clawing to get out, but I swallowed them back. What could I say? She had taken my voice in front of everyone. The silence after her words felt like the room holding its breath. For a moment, I could hear the blood in my ears. Faces turned toward me the way moths turn toward a lamp, curious, awkward, a little hungry for drama. A woman at a nearby table dabbed her eyes with her napkin. A man cleared his throat as if that sound could fix what had been done. But no one spoke for me. My hands were shaking so badly I had to fold them tight against my skirt. The arthritis in my fingers had never felt more obvious than in that moment. Little joints aching, knuckles swollen, the tiny pearls on my sleeves cool under my palms. I kept my head bowed because I could not bear the look of pity from those people who barely knew me. Pity sits heavy. It makes you small in a way I had not known until that night. Michael's silence was the sharpest hurt. I caught him out of the corner of my eye, his shoulders hunched, his jaw a thin line. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to choose between pleasing others and protecting what mattered most. He did not step forward. He did not say my name. That stillness from him felt like a hand pressing down on my chest. Lauren's friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few exchanged quick, embarrassed glances. Someone attempted a nervous laugh, and it came out like a cough. I could feel the warmth of my cheeks spreading, the kind of burning shame that makes you want to sink into the floor. The room that had moments ago felt noisy and alive had turned into a place where every sound pointed me out. I remember thinking, quite clearly, that this could be the night I simply folded into silence for good. I could have pretended the words didn't matter. I could have let the humiliation take root and grow. My first instinct was to hide, to make myself as small as the world demanded. But somewhere beneath that instinct was another voice, thin, stubborn, older than the hurt, and it wouldn't be quiet. Anger rose slowly, not like a shout but like a steady heat behind the ribs. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt necessary. I thought of every grocery bill I'd paid, every night I'd stayed up mending socks, every time I had sat through conversations about grandchildren with only half an ear because my thoughts had been elsewhere. I remembered the nights my husband stayed late at the factory and the mornings I made breakfast for the boy who would one day be Michael. Those memories did not leave me small. They stitched me together. I pressed my fingers into the receipt I had found earlier, feeling the crumple between my palm, and let that small piece of paper anchor me. Shame had tried to quiet me, but the truth, cold and factual, was a different kind of clarity. If I let that moment end with my silence, I would have given up far more than a single night's dignity. I would have surrendered every quiet insistence that I mattered. So I sat straighter. My hands stopped trembling enough to be seen. I breathed slow and steady until the heat in my chest settled into purpose. I was not prepared to be erased from my own life. I would not let a single cruel sentence said for spectacle be the final word. Something shifted inside me then, a decision born not of revenge but of necessity. I would not allow this humiliation to write the rest of my story. I would stand whatever it hurt, and I would speak. As I sat there, forcing my body into stillness, I noticed movement just beyond my table. Lauren's friend Vanessa rose quickly from her chair. She was always near Lauren at gatherings, smiling at her jokes, whispering in her ear. But that night, she carried herself with a tension that was hard to ignore. Her purse swung at her side as she moved toward the restrooms, her steps faster than the casual air she tried to keep. Then it happened, small, quiet, but to me, monumental. Her bag brushed against her leg, and a slip of paper fluttered out, landing near my feet. No one else seemed to notice. In the clamor of clinking glasses and murmured conversation, it was my eyes alone that followed its gentle fall. I bent slowly, my knees aching, and picked it up. At first, I thought it was just a receipt from the restaurant. But as my eyes adjusted, my breath caught. It was a bank receipt, stamped and dated only 2 weeks earlier. A wire transfer. I blinked hard, reading it again to be certain. The name that leapt out from the page made my stomach turn. It wasn't Lauren's. It was Michael's. And the amount, it was no small sum. It was the exact figure I had spent months fighting with the bank about. My husband's trust fund. The safety he left for me when his heart gave out. The money that had mysteriously vanished. I had been told it must have been an error. I wanted to believe it was an error. But here it was in black and white, printed clearly for anyone to see. My hands shook as I clutched it tighter. For a moment, shame gave way to grief. Not the soft grief of missing someone, but a jagged grief that comes when your last bit of trust has been stolen. If Michael had taken that money, my own son, my lifeline, then what was left for me? The humiliation from Lauren's words had already stripped me bare. This felt like the final blow. I looked toward him. He was still at Lauren's side, smiling faintly though his eyes stayed low, as though refusing to meet mine. My heart ached at the thought of betrayal by the boy I had raised. The boy who once held my hand in church, who once slipped me clumsy drawings for Mother's Day. Could he really have done this? Then my eyes flicked back to Lauren. She was radiant, basking in her role as hostess, her friends clapping her on the shoulder, raising their glasses. Her triumph now seemed cruel, deliberate. Perhaps she had humiliated me not only to belittle me, but to keep me from speaking, to silence me before I could uncover this very truth. I held the paper so tightly it crumpled in my palm. Rage, hot and heavy, rose in me, not only for the insult, but for the theft, for the game they had played at my expense. I had been so focused on the sting of being unwanted that I almost missed the deeper wound. I had been robbed, stripped of the security my husband had left me. But the fury didn't consume me. It steadied me. For the first time that evening, I felt clear, sharp, alive. Lauren thought she had ended me with her words. Instead, she had lit the fire I needed. I looked toward the microphone, gleaming on its stand across the room. My hands trembled, but no longer from shame. I had something to say, and I would not leave without saying it. The microphone stood at the far end of the room, polished and waiting, as though daring me to rise. I knew Lauren's eyes would follow me if I so much as shifted in my chair. If I walked across that room openly, she'd cut me off before I could utter a word. I had to be clever. So I sat, forcing my breathing into something steady, and studied the room. Servers wove between tables carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres, their arms trembling slightly under the weight of ceramic plates stacked with delicate pastries. One girl in particular caught my eye, young, overworked, her expression tight as she tried to balance too much at once. She was the kind of worker most guests ignored, but to me, she looked like an answer. My plan formed in a heartbeat, a small disruption to shift every gaze away from me for just long enough. Not chaos for the sake of chaos, but a doorway. A chance. When the young woman approached, I lifted my hand as though reaching for a pastry. My fingers brushed the edge of her tray, Light at first, then firmer, enough to tilt it dangerously. She gasped, but before she could recover, the tray tipped. Plates crashed to the floor, shattering into sharp fragments, cream-filled pastries scattering across the white carpet. The sound was like a gunshot in the middle of the laughter. Conversations broke off mid-word. Glasses froze mid-air. Every head turned toward the mess. Guests stood from their chairs, startled. A hush fell over the room, broken only by the nervous apologies of the young server, her face flushed red with shame. That was my moment. I pushed myself up from my chair, knees aching in protest. Every step felt heavier than the last, but I pressed forward. My old legs remembered strength they hadn't used in years. I moved with purpose, sliding between startled guests while their eyes remained fixed on the shattered plates. Michael looked up then. Our eyes met, and his widened as though he'd seen a ghost. "Mom," he called out, but his voice came too late. I had already reached the stand. My fingers closed around the microphone, cool metal against my trembling skin. For a split second, I thought my knees might give way under me. But when I lifted the mic to my mouth, a calm settled over me, deeper than anything I'd felt all evening. The chatter quieted as people realized where their attention had drifted. They turned to me, some curious, some uneasy, others eager to see what scene might unfold. Lauren's laughter, which had returned briefly after the commotion, died instantly. Her eyes locked on me, narrowed with fury. I steadied my voice. "Before you return to your party," I said, each word clear, "I need a moment." My daughter-in-law told me not to speak. But she did not say I couldn't take the microphone. And there's a difference. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A man raised his phone, recording. The room that had only minutes ago watched me with pity now leaned in, waiting, hungry for words I hadn't even yet spoken. I looked at the crumpled paper in my hand and held it high. "My husband left me a trust fund," I continued, my voice firmer now. "Money meant to keep me safe in my later years. That money vanished. I was told it was a mistake, a glitch. But tonight, something landed at my feet that told me otherwise. This receipt. A wire transfer. The exact amount of that trust." The audience stirred, murmurs spreading like waves. Michael froze, his face pale, his lips parted as though forming words he couldn't speak. Lauren's glare didn't waver, but the muscles in her jaw tightened. I pressed on, my grip tightening around the microphone. Humiliation had brought me to my knees, but betrayal had put me back on my feet. I wasn't going to stop now. The weight of the microphone in my hand steadied me, almost as if it had been waiting for me all along. I scanned the room, rows of faces staring back, some confused, some expectant. My voice trembled at first, but once it touched the speakers and echoed through the restaurant, the fear slipped away. "My daughter-in-law asked me not to speak tonight," I said, the words sharp and clear. "But she never said I couldn't take this microphone. And if you've ever been silenced in a room where your very family sits, then you know why I cannot stay quiet." The room shifted, bodies leaning forward, whispers swelling. Phones were lifted higher, little red lights blinking as guests began to record. I lifted the crumpled paper above my head. 2 weeks ago, the trust my husband left me disappeared. Every cent of it. I was told it must have been a mistake, a banking error. But tonight, I found this a receipt. A transfer. And the exact amount that went missing. Gasps spread through the guests like a sudden draft of cold air. All eyes darted between me, the paper in my hand, and Michael, who now stood frozen near Lauren. I turned toward him, my voice breaking but strong enough to carry. "Michael, the receipt bears your name. Your account. Tell me, how could you?" The words hung heavy in the air. Michael's face drained of color, his mouth parting as though to protest, but no words followed. His silence felt like guilt painted across his features. Lauren stepped forward, seizing the moment. "There you have it," she said, her voice sharp. "Your own son. He's been hiding things from you, Dorothy. From all of us." The guests murmured, some nodding, some shaking their heads. My hands shook harder, the receipt rattling like a leaf caught in the wind. I desperately wanted to believe there was a mistake, but the evidence in my palms screamed otherwise. Michael took a step toward me. "Mom," he whispered, low enough that only those close could hear. I didn't. He stopped himself, shaking his head, his throat tight. The tension was unbearable. For a moment, I thought the room itself might collapse under it. People whispered louder, speculating, waiting. The silence of my son weighed on me heavier than any insult Lauren had thrown earlier. But then clarity struck me sudden and sharp. I remembered the date printed on the receipt. 2 weeks ago. That very day, I had been in the hospital, sedated for a procedure I didn't expect. And Michael, my boy, had been at my side the entire time. He couldn't have done this. I steadied myself, raising my voice again. Wait. The room quieted, eyes snapping back to me. This receipt, it may have Michael's name, but think carefully. 2 weeks ago, I was under sedation. And my son was sitting right beside me the whole day. He could not have signed this transfer. He could not have walked into a bank. He could not have done this. The murmurs shifted now, a different tone, less certain. Some looked at Michael again, this time with doubt about his guilt. I pointed at the receipt. Look closely. The signature is not his. The handwriting stumbles where his never does. Someone wanted it to appear as if he had stolen from me. Someone who knew details only family would know. My eyes scanned the room again, sweeping past faces I barely knew, landing on Vanessa. She had returned from the restrooms, her hand clutching her purse tightly, her body stiff as if bracing for impact. Her eyes avoided mine, but her knuckles were white against the leather strap. I felt the air shift within me, the truth inching closer. I held the receipt steady, my eyes locked on Vanessa. My voice, though low, carried through every corner of that glittering room. Someone forged this. Someone who had access. Someone who wanted to see me broken, and Michael blamed. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. All at once, the eyes that had been fixed on my son began to drift toward Vanessa. She stood stiff as a statue, her painted smile frozen in place. Lauren frowned, confusion knitting her brow. Vanessa, she asked softly, almost to herself. Why are they looking at you? Vanessa shook her head quickly, forcing a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Don't be ridiculous, she said, clutching her purse tighter. I've been by your side all evening. But I stepped closer, my words cutting clean. Not all evening. You left this very table just minutes ago. And when you did, this receipt slipped from your bag. I held it high again for all to see. This is not my son's mistake. This is the work of someone who wanted to destroy him. Someone who thought I would be too humiliated to ever speak. The room gasped. A man near the bar muttered. She dropped it? I saw her walk by. Another voice chimed in. Why would she even have it? Lauren's face paled as the pieces began to fit. She turned slowly toward her friend, her voice shaking. Vanessa, why would you have my mother-in-law's trust receipt in your purse? Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. She shifted her weight, her eyes darting to the exit before snapping back to Lauren. I don't know what she's talking about, she snapped. Dorothy is confused. She's old, she's imagining things. Her words hit me like a slap, but instead of shame, they sparked a surge of strength. I straightened my shoulders, microphone steady in my grip. Old I may be, Vanessa, but I am not blind. Nor am I deaf. And tonight, you've shown your hand. Gasps echoed again. Phones were now everywhere, recording every second. What had begun as a birthday toast was now a spectacle, and I was at its center, not broken, not silent, but unyielding. Michael finally lifted his head. His voice was hoarse but certain. She's right, he said, his gaze fixed on Vanessa. Mom was with me all day. There's no way I could have signed that transfer. Someone's trying to frame me. The shift in the room was immediate. Where once I had seen pity and doubt in the eyes around me, now there was suspicion, directed at the woman who had always lingered in Lauren's shadow, the woman whose smile had never quite reached her eyes. Lauren staggered back a step, her voice trembling. Vanessa, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't. Vanessa's hand gripped her purse so tightly I thought the strap might snap. Her jaw worked as though she wanted to speak, but no words came. Her silence was louder than any denial could have been. I raised the microphone one last time, my voice ringing steady. The truth has a way of slipping out, even when people try to hide it. Tonight, that truth landed at my feet. You tried to use my silence against me, Vanessa. But silence is no longer an option. The room erupted into murmurs, half disbelief, half certainty. Guests whispered Vanessa's name like a curse. Michael stood taller, his face no longer one of shame but of fragile relief. And Lauren, my daughter-in-law, who had once taken joy in silencing me, looked torn between horror and heartbreak as she realized her closest friend might have been the very one plotting against her family. Vanessa's face drained of color. Her eyes darted toward the door, her body leaning as if ready to flee. I clutched the microphone tighter, my voice chasing her. You can run, but the truth runs faster. The moment I spoke Vanessa's name aloud, the room shifted into disorder. Chairs scraped against the floor, conversations broke into frantic whispers, and faces that once ignored me now stared wide-eyed. Vanessa's lips parted as though to respond, but no words followed. Her silence betrayed her more than any confession could. Lauren's face drained of color. She stepped closer to her friend, her voice trembling. Vanessa, tell me it isn't true. But Vanessa didn't answer. Instead, her gaze darted to the exit, then back to me. In that instant, I saw it, the panic of someone cornered. The next second, she moved. She bolted toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. The crowd gasped, then erupted into chaos. Some people stood to watch, others pressed against the walls to get out of her way. A glass toppled from a table, shattering as voices rose in confusion. Stop her, someone shouted, though no one did. Guests were frozen between disbelief and fear, their expensive clothes and champagne glasses far more important than tackling a fleeing woman. Michael reacted first. My son's voice rang through the room as he sprinted after her, Vanessa. Lauren hesitated only a moment before running too, her gown shimmering as she pushed past startled guests. I followed as quickly as my aching knees allowed, my heart hammering harder than it had in years. I wasn't fast, but I refused to stay behind. By the time I reached the door, Vanessa had disappeared into the night. Michael and Lauren were already blocks ahead, chasing her through the streets of downtown Denver. I forced my body forward, clutching the edge of the doorway for support, then stepping into the cold air. The city lights glared against the dark sky, traffic rushing past as horns blared. I saw Lauren's gown flash as she darted across a crosswalk, Michael close at her side. Vanessa was further ahead, weaving through startled pedestrians, her purse clutched tightly against her chest. I pushed myself onward, my lungs burning, my legs heavy. I thought of giving up, letting the young chase her down, but something deeper kept me moving. This wasn't just their fight. It was mine. That money was my husband's last gift to me, and I would not let it vanish without a fight. When I finally caught up to Michael and Lauren, they were huddled at the corner of a street, out of breath. Michael's eyes searched frantically, scanning every direction. She's headed for the airport, he said breathlessly, pointing toward a taxi vanishing into the distance. I saw the tag on her luggage earlier. She planned this. She's running. Lauren's face twisted with disbelief. The airport? She can't just leave. Yes, she can, I cut in, my voice firmer than I expected. And if she gets on a plane tonight, we may never see her again. Michael clenched his fists. Then we're going after her. We rushed toward my car, an old Ford Explorer that had carried me faithfully for years. She wasn't fast, but she was steady, and tonight she would carry us into a chase I never imagined I'd be part of. As we pulled into traffic, the city blurred around us. Lights flashing, sirens wailing in the distance. My son's hands gripped the steering wheel tight, his jaw clenched. Lauren sat in the back, her phone pressed to her ear, trying to call Vanessa again and again. Each attempt ended the same, silence. She turned her phone off, Lauren muttered, her voice breaking. She was my closest friend. How could she? I cut her off gently. She was never your friend, Lauren. She wore that mask for years. But tonight the mask slipped. The highway stretched before us, lanes of red brake lights and glowing billboards flickering across the windshield. Michael drove with both hands tight on the wheel, pushing my old car harder than I ever had. Each mile we closed felt like a heartbeat pounding in my chest. Lauren leaned forward from the back seat, her voice sharp with urgency. She had a suitcase, Dorothy. She's not just running from the party. She's leaving the country. I turned toward her, my stomach sinking. And if she gets on that plane, the money and the truth go with her. We said little else. The silence inside the car was heavier than the roar of traffic outside. My mind raced through every memory of Vanessa. Her polite smiles, her too watchful eyes, the way she seemed to know things she shouldn't. All those years, I thought she was just Lauren's clingy friend. Now I knew better. She had been waiting for this moment. At last, the airport signs appeared overhead. Michael swerved into the exit lane, tires screeching slightly as we turned. My old Explorer rattled under the pressure, but she held. I whispered a quick prayer under my breath, not just for the car but for the strength to see this through. The terminal loomed ahead, a flood of glass and steel bathed in bright lights. People streamed in and out with rolling luggage. Taxis honked, shuttles beeped. Somewhere in that sea of travelers, Vanessa was slipping further from our reach. We parked hastily in the nearest lot and rushed inside. The automatic doors whooshed open, releasing a wave of noise, announcements echoing overhead, wheels clattering across tile floors, children crying, voices layered one over another. My legs ached, but I forced them forward. We scanned the departure board, eyes darting from city to city. Then Lauren spotted it, Paris. Boarding now. Her voice cracked as she pointed. That's her flight. She told me earlier it was a spontaneous trip. She lied right to my face. Michael's jaw tightened. Gate C32. Let's move. We pushed through the crowds, weaving between travelers dragging bags twice their size. My breath came in short bursts, but I kept going. The thought of losing to Vanessa after everything fueled me more than fear or exhaustion ever could. Then I saw her, just ahead near the gate. Vanessa's back was to us, her coat draped over one arm, her suitcase handle gripped firmly in the other. She stood in line, moments away from handing over her boarding pass. Vanessa, I shouted, my voice raw. Heads turned, but she didn't. She knew it was me, of course she did, but she refused to acknowledge me. Michael surged forward, but the crowd slowed him down. Lauren shouted her name too, tears in her voice. Still, Vanessa kept her head high, edging closer to the attendant. The tension was unbearable. Every step she took toward that gate felt like sand slipping through an hourglass. I willed my legs to move faster, but the ache in my knees fought me with each stride. Still, I pressed on, refusing to let pain decide the outcome of this night. Then, just as she handed over her boarding pass, something stopped her. A woman stood from one of the nearby seats, her face pale, her eyes locked on Vanessa with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. It was Lena, Vanessa's mother. She stepped into her daughter's path, her voice steady but filled with ache. It's over, Vanessa. My heart clenched. In that moment, the chase stilled. Vanessa froze, her boarding pass trembling in her hand. The look on her face wasn't triumph anymore. It was fear and recognition. The sight of Lena standing there in the terminal stopped me in my tracks. Her hair was thinner, her back slightly stooped, but her presence was undeniable. She blocked her daughter's path with nothing more than a look, and it was enough to freeze Vanessa where she stood. Vanessa's eyes widened, her boarding pass trembling between her fingers. Mother, she whispered, though it came out more like a hiss than a greeting. Lena's voice was low but steady, carrying just enough strength to pierce the noise of the airport. It's over, Vanessa. It ends tonight. I felt my chest tighten. Memories stirred in me. Faint stories my husband had once shared about a business partner named Henry Peterson, the man who nearly cost him everything. The man who had been caught stealing from their company before vanishing into disgrace. Henry had a daughter. A little girl. And in that instant, I knew. You're Henry's child, I said softly, my voice carrying more wonder than accusation. Vanessa's head snapped toward me, her eyes blazing. Don't you say his name, she shouted, startling those in line behind her. You and your husband destroyed him. You ruined his life. And you, she jabbed a finger at me, trembling with rage. You've lived comfortably ever since, while we were left with nothing. Lauren gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She turned to me, tears brimming. Is it true? Dorothy, did you know? I shook my head slowly. I knew Henry. I knew what he did. But I didn't know about her. Vanessa's laugh was bitter, sharp. Of course you didn't. I made sure of it. I took another name, built another story. I smiled at Lauren, played the loyal friend, stood close enough to your family to watch it rot from the inside. Her voice cracked, but the venom in it didn't fade. I've been waiting for this moment for years. The crowd around us had grown, travelers slowing their pace to watch. Michael stepped closer to me, his face pale with disbelief. All this time, you were after us? Vanessa's grip on her suitcase tightened. I didn't just want the money. I wanted you to feel what my father felt. Humiliated. Stripped of respect. Alone. And when I saw how fragile Dorothy was, how easily silenced, I knew it would be simple. Her words pierced me, but instead of breaking me, they hardened my resolve. You thought you could erase me with cruelty? I said, my voice calm but firm. But all you did was expose yourself. You carried your hatred for decades, and it's eaten you alive. Vanessa's eyes shimmered, but with fury, not tears. She looked at her mother again. Get out of my way. Lena's answer came not with words, but with the sudden appearance of two airport police officers at her side. Their uniforms caught the light, their expressions stern. Vanessa Peterson? One of them called. For the first time that night, I saw the mask slip entirely. Vanessa's shoulders sagged, her defiance faltering as the officers approached. She glanced wildly around her, as if searching for a final escape, but the gate attendant had already stepped aside, shaking her head firmly. Her mother's hand lifted, not to strike, but to offer a final plea. Please, Vanessa. Stop this before you lose everything. But Vanessa only clutched her suitcase tighter, her knuckles white. I've already lost everything, she whispered. The officers moved closer, their voices firm but even. Ma'am, we need you to step aside. We have some questions about financial misconduct linked to your name. Vanessa's body stiffened. Her eyes darted wildly, first to the gate, then to her mother, then finally to me. For a brief moment, all the fire in her gaze gave way to something raw, fear. She dropped her suitcase, the wheels clattering against the tile floor. The sound echoed through the terminal, turning even more heads in our direction. A hush fell over the crowd. Travelers who had no part in our story now watched with curiosity, their journeys momentarily paused. Lauren's voice broke the silence. Vanessa, why? Her words cracked, each syllable laced with grief. You were my friend. I trusted you with my children. I trusted you with everything. Vanessa's lips trembled, but she didn't answer. She looked at Lauren with something close to regret, but it was smothered quickly by bitterness. You had everything I didn't. A loving husband, a family name that meant something, a life that wasn't built on shame. I wanted to take it from you, piece by piece, until you knew what it felt like. Michael stepped forward, fists clenched at his sides. His voice shook with anger. So you stole from my mother. You tried to turn us against each other. You wanted to see us destroy ourselves. Vanessa lifted her chin defiantly, but her voice cracked under the weight of truth. Yes, I wanted to see you crumble, just like my father did. You'll never understand what it was like to watch him fade into nothing, to hear people whisper his name like a curse. He was my father. He was all I had. Her words cut deep, but they revealed the emptiness behind her rage. Lena stepped closer then, her frail hands reaching out, trembling. Vanessa, I begged you to let it go. Your father made his choices. He lost everything because of what he did, not because of Dorothy or her husband. Carrying his shame has only destroyed you. Vanessa's chest heaved. Her hands covered her face for a moment, muffling a choked sob. When she lowered them, her expression was fractured, half fury, half a child's helplessness. He was my father. You don't turn your back on blood. The officers were patient but firm. Ma'am, it's time to come with us. Vanessa didn't fight as they took her by the arm. Her shoulders slumped, her strength evaporating. For the first time all night, she looked less like a schemer and more like the broken girl she had once been. Lena's tears fell freely as she whispered, I'm so sorry, Dorothy. I tried to stop her. I knew she was carrying this hatred, but I didn't realize how deep it had rooted. I found the wire transfer receipt in her purse, and I knew this day was coming. I looked at Lena, and for a moment I saw my own reflection, an older woman burdened by the choices of others, trying to hold her family together even as it slipped through her fingers. My anger softened, though my hurt remained. Lauren stepped closer to me, tears streaking her face. "Dorothy, I don't know how to make this right. I was cruel to you tonight. I let pride blind me. But Vanessa's betrayal..." Her voice cracked, and she shook her head. "I see now how wrong I've been." Michael wrapped his arm around me then, holding me steady as my knees threatened to give way. "Mom," he whispered, voice thick, "you didn't just expose her. You saved us. If you hadn't spoken, she would have torn us apart." I looked back at Vanessa one last time as the officers led her away. Her head hung low, her step slow. She looked smaller than ever, no longer the woman who had once commanded a room with her sharp remarks and false smiles. She was no longer the friend who whispered in Lauren's ear, no longer the shadow that lurked in family gatherings. She was simply a daughter carrying her father's disgrace, until it consumed her. And as I stood in that airport terminal, weary but unbroken, I realized something. Hatred may last decades, but so does truth. And the truth had finally spoken louder than her vengeance. The days after Vanessa's arrest felt like the passing of a long storm. Papers were signed, accounts investigated, and piece by piece, the truth became undeniable. The trust fund my husband had worked so hard to leave behind for me was restored. The numbers glowed clearly on the statement the bank sent, no longer hidden in forged transfers or false documents. I sat with that paper at my kitchen table, my tea cooling beside me, and for the first time in years, I felt seen. Not because of money, but because my voice had mattered. My courage had pulled truth out of the shadows, and no one could take that away from me. Lauren came to see me soon after. Her face was pale from sleepless nights, her eyes heavy with regret. She stood in my doorway as though uncertain if she had the right to enter. "Dorothy," she whispered, her hands twisting nervously. "I don't deserve your kindness after what I did. I shamed you in front of everyone. I thought silencing you would protect my image, when really, all I did was wound the person who deserved the most respect." Her voice broke, and I saw tears she didn't try to hide. I reached for her hand, my own fingers stiff from arthritis but steady in purpose. "Lauren," I said softly, "we all lose our way when pride takes the lead. What matters is whether we find the strength to return." She sobbed then, shoulders shaking, her head resting against me as though she were the child and I the mother. That night, we spoke long into the evening. Not about Vanessa, not about betrayal, but about family, about trust, about starting over. Michael came the next day, his face bright with relief. "Mom, I can't believe how strong you were. You stood taller than all of us. You reminded me of Dad. He would have been proud." Hearing those words lifted a weight I hadn't known still lingered. For so long, I thought of myself as a woman fading into the background. But that night at the party, in my navy blue dress, I found something I thought was gone forever. My voice. That dress, with its simple fabric and steady color, became more than clothing. It became a symbol, a reminder that hope doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Slowly, the loneliness I had carried since my husband's passing began to ease. Family dinners no longer felt like obligations, but gatherings filled with laughter. Lauren no longer stood apart from me, but beside me, her eyes warmer, her smile sincere. Even the grandchildren began to seek me out more, their little arms wrapping around my waist as they asked me for stories of when Daddy was small. The house that once echoed with silence now hummed with life, and in that sound I found healing. As the weeks passed, I often found myself standing before the mirror, my navy blue dress carefully hung nearby. It was not the most fashionable piece in my wardrobe, nor the most expensive. Yet it carried within its threads the night I refused to be silenced. Each time I touched the fabric, I remembered how my trembling voice turned into strength, how humiliation gave way to courage, and how betrayal could not bury the truth forever. I realized then that betrayal can silence you for a moment, but only truth has the power to restore your voice. Lies are loud for a season, but truth has a way of waiting patiently until the moment comes to speak louder than all the noise around it. For a long time, I believed that growing older meant growing invisible, that my opinions no longer mattered, that my presence was just tolerated rather than cherished. But that night at the Gilded Lily, when Lauren tried to silence me and Vanessa tried to destroy me, I discovered something I wish I had known sooner. Your voice is your inheritance, and no one has the right to take it from you. Lauren has kept her promise to me since then. She no longer brushes me aside or hides her words behind pride. She listens, she asks questions, she leans on me in ways I never expected. Our bond is not perfect, but it is genuine now, woven with humility and forgiveness instead of distance and pride. Michael, too, has stood closer by my side. He confessed one evening that my courage that night taught him something he hadn't learned in all his years of business and success. That silence, when forced upon you, is more dangerous than speaking out. He told me, "Mom, you showed me that strength doesn't always shout, it stands firm." And so my home, once lonely and cold, has become a place of reconciliation. The sound of laughter in the kitchen, the warmth of family meals, the joy of watching my grandchildren run through the yard, it all feels like a second chance at life. Now, as I speak to you, dear listener, I want to leave you with this. If you have ever felt silenced, pushed aside, or made to feel invisible, remember this story. Betrayal may wound you. Humiliation may make you shrink for a moment. But truth will always return your voice. Do not let anyone tell you that age makes you less valuable. Your years carry wisdom, and your voice carries weight. And here's my final prayer for you. I lift a prayer for you right now. To every woman in her 60s, 70s, and 80s listening to me, may your strength never fade. May your days be filled with health, with peace, and with the love of family who honor you. May your nights bring rest, not worry. And if you feel forgotten, may God remind you that you are deeply seen, deeply valued, and deeply loved. Before we close, I invite you to stay part of this family. Subscribe to this channel so we can walk together through stories of betrayal, drama, and triumph. Like this video if it touched your heart, and share it so others may also find strength in their own trials. And most importantly, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and share a piece of your journey, so we can pray for you by name. This is my story. This is my truth. And it is my gift to you. Never let silence steal your voice.